Good evening and welcome to the AI Predictive Power event. I'm your host, Chris Hurt. Glad you're here. If you've turned on the news lately, you have undoubtedly heard the world is now being swept by an artificial intelligence or AI revolution. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. News stories are coming out left and right about how AI is going to change everything from how we learn to how we work, how we communicate, and how we shop. And of course, the spark that launched this revolution was last December's release of the breakthrough AI language processing program. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's called ChatGPT. Now, this is a program that can generate human-like responses to very complex questions almost immediately, in a matter of seconds. Well, today, we're here to investigate the latest breakthrough AI program, which could soon prove to be just as revolutionary. And this one is not in language processing, but of all places in the field of finance. This program is called ANI, which is A-N-E. It's short for Analytical Engine, and it is the brainchild of one of America's leading computer programmers and data scientists, a man named Keith Kaplan, who you'll meet in just a few moments here. And for over 6 years now, Keith and his team have worked with one goal in mind: harness the incredible predictive power of AI and put it in the hands of the everyday person. Now, Keith says they finally achieved that goal, and he is ready to unveil ANI to the world here, right now, today. He also claims its market predictions are so accurate that anyone who follows them could add huge sums to their nest egg. But this begs a very important question. Would you ever trust the stock analysis of artificial intelligence? You know, for most people, that answer is not quite so simple to answer. But before you make up your own mind, let me get you to take a look at this chart. What you're looking at is a stock chart of Amazon, a company where most of us are familiar with. I want you to notice the red X at the end of last year, because that is when ANI made a prediction of what was going to happen to Amazon's stock price in the near future. If you look to your right, you will see 3 blue circles. Now, those circles represent where ANI thought Amazon's stock price would be in 2 weeks, 1 month, and 2 months from that prediction date. So how did ANI do? Take a look at the results. The green line you see here represents the actual stock price. This is what Amazon stock actually did over the course of the next 2 months. And as you can see, ANI's forecast was pretty darn close. 2 weeks into the future, right here in early January, ANI said Amazon was essentially going nowhere, and it was spot on. 1 month out, in January of this year, ANI said Amazon would jump 9.4%. In reality, it jumped 14.5%, pretty accurate. 2 months into the future, in late February, ANI said Amazon would be up 5.4%. The stock was actually up 11.4%. A little off there, but still very close. Let me show you another one. This is a manufacturing company called Vontier Corporation, and ANI made this prediction in September of last year. Again, we see the blue circles, which represent the predicted stock price 2 weeks, 1 month, and 2 months from the prediction date. How did it do? Well, here ANI was even more accurate than it had been with Amazon. 1 month into the future, ANI had said Vontier would increase 11.7%. Vontier actually increased 11.8%, almost spot on to the 10th of a percentage point. 2 months out, ANI said Vontier would go up 14.7%. It actually went up 13.5%. Again, almost exactly right. Here's another example. Last September, ANI was also tasked with predicting the future price of the exchange-traded fund GLD, which is designed to track the price of gold. Now, ANI said that in 2 months, GLD would go down 4.3%. 2 months later, GLD was down exactly 4.3%. This time it was dead accurate. So here's another question. What would you do if you had access to these kinds of predictions? What if you knew that in 1 month Amazon would be worth 10% more than it is today? Would you buy shares? Absolutely, of course you would. What if you knew that 2 months from now, gold was going to be down 4%? Would you sell? Well, maybe, maybe not. You'd certainly be more informed to make a choice. And what if you had this predictive data for all of the major stocks or ETFs on the market? What would you do with this kind of predictive power? Because even the worst investor out there could start with a modest sum and build substantial wealth in no time. If you invested in stocks, Annie says, are positioned to go up, depending on your initial investment, of course, that alone could add hundreds of thousands of dollars to your nest egg in just a few months' time. Any money you accumulated, you could hold on to. On the other hand, if you stayed away from the stocks that Annie says are poised to go down, you could avoid punishing losses. So market crashes, inflation, not having enough money for retirement, or outliving your current nest egg, those conceivably could be worries of the past. In fact, what I'm leading up to here is this. This could be a complete retirement game changer. But again, the question is, does the technology really exist to make these kinds of spot-on predictions? Is Annie for real, or is it just too good to be true? How accurate is it? And is it really safe to trust the analysis of an AI computer program? These are all very valid questions, and we are going to do our best to get to the bottom of those and answer those questions in today's broadcast. And I've got just the guest here to help us answer those questions. Joining me now is Keith Kaplan. He heads up a company called TradeSmith. This is a company that's known for its groundbreaking financial innovations, but perhaps none more groundbreaking than what Keith is going to reveal today. He is going to unveil Annie, which promises to be one of the most revolutionary financial technologies in decades, and he's here to give us all of the details right now. Keith, thank you very much for joining us, and it is great to have you.
Chris, it is great to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So Keith, this is, as I said just a moment ago, the big reveal of an innovation I know that you and your team have worked very hard on. 6 years is a long time. You got to be excited, right?
Very much so.
But now your company, TradeSmith, is known. You have a reputation for developing financial innovations that can predict the market. So just to kick things off here, why is Annie so special? What makes this so different from anything you've done in the past?
Yeah, it's a great question, Chris, and I'm so glad that you asked. It boils down to two things, really. Number one, AI is an absolutely revolutionary tool when it comes to predicting and potentially profiting from the markets. We are always trying to push our products to the next level. And AI was really the missing link that allowed us to do that. And number two is accuracy. You are right. Over the years, we have developed a lot of financial innovations that can predict the markets. But this is by far our most accurate tool for that. This is on a completely different level than anything that we have ever done before. In fact, what our team was able to produce was better than we could have ever imagined at the outset. And AI is the reason for that. In fact, because of the predictive power of AI, I could see Annie soon becoming our flagship technology. AI is that much of a game changer here. And I'm so proud of my team and what they have found in the way to harness its power and put it into the hands of the everyday person out there. I think folks are going to be quite pleased with what we're going to share.
Right, and we're excited to have you here sharing this with us, because when I first heard about Annie, I was, of course, very intrigued by this, and I was really hoping to get a chance to talk to you about this innovation, so I'm glad we're getting that chance now. But I have to admit, when I heard about what your team was working on and had developed, I was also, well, let's just be honest, very skeptical. So I did a little bit of research for the interview here. I met with your team, members of your team, and I appreciate how candid they were with me. They let me look through some of your data and through a number of Annie's predictions, and I have to say, what your team has developed is very impressive. I mean, after all, I showed a few of its forecasts at the top of this broadcast. You saw those a moment ago, and they were obviously remarkably accurate. But I also have a responsibility here to play devil's advocate for a moment, because the idea that anything can so accurately predict the stock market, whether it's a person or a machine, you got to admit that's a little hard to believe. Some people that's laughable to a lot of people in some ways, you know?
Chris, you are right. Any normal person should immediately call BS, but I am prepared to show you how Annie works. The examples you showed are just a few of the many that showed just how accurate our system is. We have thousands more. But even more important, that's the data. At TradeSmith, we are absolutely obsessed with data, and we would not introduce anything to the public unless we could prove it's able to do what we say it will do, beyond a shadow of a doubt, with real hard numbers. And that's what we have to back up each and every one of Annie's predictions.
All right, well, that sounds good. And speaking of predictions, as I understand it, you're actually going to reveal some of Annie's latest predictions a little later on in this broadcast, right?
That's right, Chris. I want to give the folks at home a sneak peek at Annie's capabilities so that they can start using its forecast right away. So, a little later on in this broadcast, we're going to go ahead and show a few of Annie's latest predictions about the future stock prices of a few of the most talked about companies on the planet. These companies are in the news almost on a daily basis, so I think folks are going to be intrigued to see what Annie's saying about them. Are Annie's forecasts different from what the mainstream media is saying? Well, folks will go ahead and get to find out for free a little bit later on.
Okay, well, that's great. It'll be interesting to see what Annie is saying about those companies, especially considering that your company, TradeSmith, is certainly no stranger to making accurate predictions about the markets.
We aren't, Chris. This is something that TradeSmith has been doing for over a decade now. We have a staff of 36 data scientists, software engineers, and investment analysts working on developing our market algorithms. Our team literally has hundreds of years of collective experience in the software development and data science fields. We have spent over $18 million and over 50,000 man-hours developing the most cutting-edge financial innovations on the market. One of our most popular products, it's called TradeStops. It's one of the smartest predictive technologies in the world. It makes 9,250 calculations every single day for over 6,000 stocks out there. It analyzes all kinds of metrics like volatility and trading volume to predict future stock price movement. This enables you to time the market with incredible accuracy. This has helped many people get in and out of stocks at the most optimal time, which can increase their gains by sometimes as much as 10x. Lately, we've been helping a top trader who's followed by thousands of everyday folks improve his trade recommendations. For example, he recommended Zillow in April of 2020. The stock exploded after he said to get in, but he didn't time the exit right, and he actually lost 15%. Because of its incredible ability to time the markets, TradeStops would have gotten him out of the trade at just the right time before a big drop to instead hand him a 158% gain. That's an improvement of more than 10x.
Wow, which is quite an improvement.
It is. It did the same thing with a company called Magnite, helping another top trader with a huge following earn a 350% gain instead of a mere 30% gain. That's another 10x increase. And TradeStops is only one example. We've also developed technologies to master the options market. We have engineered the world's first software that we know of that can tell you the probability that an options trade will be profitable before you ever trade it.
Okay, so let me make sure I got this right. Before I sell, let's say, a put option on Tesla, for example, it would tell me that a particular option would have, I don't know, 90% chance of being profitable?
Exactly right. It is that precise.
Well, that's pretty impressive, especially considering there's something, what is it, 40 million options trades on the exchanges every single day.
Yeah, and like I said, Chris, at TradeSmith, we're obsessed with data. Our company analyzes all kinds of financial data using ultra-high-speed computers to make sense of nearly every asset out there on the market. We've done the same thing with the crypto market as well. Ever since Bitcoin burst onto the scene, we have used cutting-edge technology to predict the future price of altcoins. And we've done the same thing for the market as a whole, accurately forecasting the stock market crash in early 2020. That was caused by the coronavirus, as we know. The big tech crash at the beginning of last year, one of the worst in 50 years. And our technologies would have also predicted major market events in the past, like the housing crash of 2008 and the dot-com crash in 2000. In fact, backtest, they show that we would have predicted every major bull and bear market for the last 20 years. Our technologies have made all of these predictions but the same exact way, and that is by analyzing reams and reams of data.
Keith, that is really something. And you know, in doing my research for this interview, I did notice that these innovations you just mentioned, they have helped a lot of people secure a comfortable retirement. Bear with me for a minute because I know I came across a letter, here it is, from Amy Kay. She wrote in and said this: she has been able to amass $5.4 million using TradeSmith's products. I got a gentleman here named Rob S. who wrote in to say he'd made $1 million using your innovations. That's very impressive.
Well, thank you, and that's right. Our technologies have helped a lot of folks. In fact, they're now being used by over 66,000 individuals to help track over $30 billion in assets. And we get letters like the ones that you just described all the time, Chris.
So, Keith, the message that I'm hearing is that TradeSmith is the leader in financial technology. Is that the bottom line here?
It is. That's been one of our core missions for the past decade.
All right, but today, what you're saying is that you're going to present the next level of that technology, and that is, of course, AI, as we've already discussed here. We already talked about the fact that Annie is artificial intelligence, and from everything that you've just shared with us, it seems as though TradeSmith is uniquely positioned to bring this kind of innovation to market. It's almost as if you've been preparing for this all along. This is right in your wheelhouse. This is the culmination of all that hard work.
That is exactly right, Chris. AI has been in the news a lot lately, especially with the launch of ChatGPT.
Right.
And when it was released, it surprised a lot of folks with its capabilities, but not the folks on my team. We have been researching and using AI for years now. We knew what it was capable of a long time ago. We knew it was going to be an absolute breakthrough technology, and we wanted to see what would happen if we took the incredible predictive power of our algorithms that they are known for, but this time we add in AI.
Right, so you're not chasing a trend here. I mean, you're leading the way. You're the tip of the spear.
Correct. I mean, we are not chasing a trend at all, Chris. Our company is, and always has been, in a constant state of R&D, that's research and development, to make our products better and better. We are always looking to push the envelope, to take our innovations to the very next level. And years ago, we saw AI was the way to do that. So developing a predictive AI algorithm was really the next logical step for us. We then set about creating the most predictive market algorithm possible. And to do that, we developed everything, and I mean everything on our own. That's all the data science, all the computer programming, all the AI development. It was all engineered in-house by our team. It's all proprietary. This isn't some plug-and-play AI algorithm that we downloaded from a third party. To get it right, we had to actually start from scratch.
So you really went all out on this, is what you're saying, Keith. But what is it, I'm curious to know, what is it that made you decide back then, six years ago, I think, that AI was going to be the thing to take your products to that next level?
That's a great question, Chris. And it has to do with what AI really is at its core. There are a lot of misconceptions about AI. Folks are picturing robots taking over the world. They are wondering if it will take their jobs, but really, at its core, AI is simply an advanced form of pattern recognition. And that's what my company has been doing for the last decade, developing highly sophisticated software to analyze data to recognize patterns in the markets. But AI takes that to another level. Adding in AI can improve pattern recognition exponentially, because AI is pattern recognition on steroids. It's like going from a rotary phone to a smartphone, like going from dial-up to 5G. When it comes to sifting, sorting, and analyzing data, then recognizing patterns within that data to make predictions, now that we have this technology, looking back, it's like we were using a bicycle to cross the country, whereas today, thanks to AI, we can take a supersonic jet. AI is an absolute game-changing technology. And so, with Annie, we are harnessing the power of AI and directing it toward the arena where it can quite possibly make the greatest impact on society, certainly on the lives of everyday folks, the financial world.
Yeah, okay. From bicycle to supersonic jet, I can see now how AI really could bring your company's products to the next level, as you mentioned. But let's get down to brass tacks, as they say, because I did show earlier a few charts of Annie's predictions at the beginning of the broadcast. I want to revisit those because this is essentially what is so revolutionary about this innovation, its predictive power, especially when it comes to stock prices, right? So if you would, let's dive deeper into those so that everybody out there can really get a sense of what this is all about. And in my mind, Keith, I think the best way to do that is can we look at another example that I came across when doing research? And if you would, I want you to walk us through it and try to really paint the picture for us. Are you okay with that?
You got it. I think it's a great idea.
All right, so let's take a look at this. This is a company called Martin Marietta Materials. Ticker symbol is MLM. And again, just as earlier, we see the red X where Annie made its predictions sometime in last October. And again, we have those interesting blue circles that follow behind, which represent Annie's predictions 2 weeks, 1 month, and then 2 months out. Now, let's go to what actually happened. And look at this. Again, this is pretty incredible. Annie's a little off in its forecast, but by and large, that stock price went exactly where Annie predicted, especially at the 1 month mark. I mean, Annie's only off here by maybe 1% or so, from what I can tell. So if you think about how the stock price of Martin Marietta could have moved over the course of that month. I mean, it could have gone up 10%, it could have gone down 10%, it could have jumped 23%, nosedived 36%. I'm making up numbers here. It may not have moved at all. The possibilities are endless. But from this circle, it looks like Annie predicted it would go up around 6% or so. And it also looks like Martin Marietta stock is up about 7%. So to me, this accuracy is pretty remarkable. And I don't mean to sound so much like a doubting Thomas here, Keith, but this just looks so good. I just wonder, is it too good to be true? How is Annie doing this? Walk us through this step by step, if you don't mind, please.
Well, don't worry about being too doubtful, Chris. You won't offend me at all. I welcome your skepticism and everybody out there. This is what we do at my company when we analyze our technology. We spend hours and hours testing our assumptions, trying to poke holes in our results,
right?
Trying to prove ourselves wrong. It's the most important thing. Everything that we'll talk about today has already been through a lot of scrutiny. But to help you understand what's really going on, I think it's best to start with how our AI system really works. You see, we said earlier that AI is an advanced form of pattern recognition, and it is. But that's only part of the equation. What makes Annie so accurate is it also employs what we call machine learning.
Okay, so let me stop you there because in my mind, AI and machine learning are pretty much the same thing. Am I wrong about that?
Well, they're very closely related. Machine learning is actually a subset of AI, a derivative, so to speak. The difference is very subtle, but it's very important here. The best way to explain it is AI has the ability to learn and problem solve from new information fed to it by a human. That's the pattern recognition component. But machine learning, that's when a computer uses mathematical models to make sense of those patterns and help it learn without direct instruction.
Okay, so machine learning is when a computer system can learn on its own.
Essentially, yes.
Well, so how does that enable Annie to make such accurate predictions then?
Well, the way traditional investment data analytics worked before machine learning, a human would think of a set of parameters that he would like to test, and then enter those parameters into a computer. Using pattern recognition, the computer would then perform a test of those parameters over past financial market data and analyze the results. If the results were great, you would consider implementing the investment strategy in real life. For example, let's say you might want to test what kind of returns you'd have earned in the past by buying a stock when it trades at a cheap 12 times earnings multiple.
All right, so in this case, you'd be running a test to find out the returns of undervalued stocks.
Yes, you would be. That's a classic test a lot of analysts run. Or you could run a test to see what kind of returns you could earn based on how a stock is trending, let's say. Obviously, folks like to find stocks that are trending up. To find that, you could test what happens if you only own a stock when it trades above its 200-day moving average. Or you could run both tests at the very same time and see what happens when you buy a stock that is both undervalued and in an uptrend. As we all know, everyone has their own metric that they like to look at.
Right.
Over the years, people have tested hundreds or even thousands of indicators and combinations of indicators. The key here is a human, not the machine, is selecting the strategy or parameters that are tested. And there's a lot wrong with that. For instance, was their testing even accurate? Did they test the model the right way? Will their test play out in the future like it did in the past? Just because a particular test worked in the past doesn't actually mean it will play out the same way in the future. Take what just happened over the last year and a half or so. Since the beginning of 2022, we have been in a completely different type of market. Would a model that worked during the dot-com boom of the late 90s work the same as it does today? Not likely.
Yeah, I never actually thought of it that way. So somebody might test their model, and because they're right one time, they may incorrectly assume they're going to be right all the time. Is that what we're getting at?
They do, and to be honest, it's a big mistake that a lot of analysts are making out there.
Right, so I'm following you there, but how does machine learning make this process better?
All right, great question. Machine learning actually flips this process in a powerful way. With machine learning, a human is not designing the parameters. The machine is actually designing the parameters.
Okay, so in the case of Annie, the machine is creating the marching orders instead of the human sending those marching orders to Annie.
Exactly right. Instead of telling Annie what to test, we actually fed it huge amounts of data and suggested a desired outcome, like find a reliable stock picking method that does well with 30-day holding periods. And Annie went ahead and crunched trillions of data points to see if it could create a useful system. But here's the key. Not just anyone can do this. You need a lot of money. I mean a lot of money, a lot of time, and you need access to a tremendous amount of data. Then you have to make sure the data is accurate before you ever feed it into the machine. Not only that, once the machine finds a useful model, you have to run that model through every single type of market in the past to train the system to work in all types of scenarios out there. It took us a while to get to the point where we could actually reliably trust Annie to predict a stock's future price action.
Yeah. Well, from the examples that we've seen so far, it seems like you found what you were looking for here. But after all, Annie's predictions have been pretty accurate, the ones that we've seen so far. In fact, why don't we look at another example just to make sure that I'm connecting the dots here correctly. Let's take a look at this one. This is United States Oil ETF. Ticker symbol is USO. And it looks here like Annie is saying the price is going to go up over the next month, and then 2 months from its prediction date, Annie is saying USO will drop around, 8% there. So in this scenario, how does Annie know what to do? Since, as you just said, no human is giving it any specific parameters on how to analyze this stock.
Right. So we gave Annie a single command, and that is find the price of USO 2 weeks from now, 1 month from now, and 2 months from now. We didn't tell it what to analyze, how to find it, and we didn't give it any sort of hints. We give Annie access to thousands and thousands of our data sets. Our goal was to create a system that has strong predictive ability over the short term, around 30 days. These data sets included macroeconomic data such as interest rates, GDP growth, stock market volatility, consumer sentiment figures, and inflation figures, everything. We also included fundamental data like profit margins, revenue growth, and price to sales ratios. We included technical data like relative price strength and moving averages. We brought no preconceived notions or biases to this project. There wasn't a fanatical fundamental investor on a team rooting for his or her strategy. There wasn't a dedicated technical analyst rooting for his or her strategy. We just gave the machine a desired destination to find the price of a stock over the short term and let the machine do the rest of the work. We didn't teach the program anything. It actually taught itself.
That's amazing. You separated the chaff from the wheat there with all the information, took out all the extraneous stuff. So let's check the results to see if it worked. Was Annie able to teach itself how to find the future price of USO? Here's what it came up with. Again, these predictions are almost spot on. Looks like the 2-week and the 1-month predictions are just about dead accurate, maybe a few percentage points off at 2 months. The stock dipped about 9%, but just as Annie said it would. Incredible. So with this information, any investor out there could simply avoid USO, or they could sell it if they already have it as well and save themselves a lot of money here, right? So it's interesting that you explained how this is all a result of feeding thousands of data sets into your Annie algorithm and having it learn on its own what it needs to make a prediction. Because I was reading about the revolutionary ChatGPT program, and I believe it works very much the same way.
Yeah, that's actually a great observation, Chris. Just to give some context for folks who may not know, ChatGPT is the largest, most powerful AI language model ever created. And what makes it so revolutionary is, if you ask it a question, it can give you an appropriate response, all in context, such that if you didn't know ahead of time, you wouldn't know whether you were talking to a very smart person or a machine. And it can also do complex tasks, explain Newton's laws of motion, write a poem in the same style of Walt Whitman, even summarize the book Pride and Prejudice. Well, how does it do all of that? Machine learning, but more specifically, through a process called pre-training. The ChatGPT AI algorithm is fed billions and billions of words. It then reads through those words with billions of parameters and can process them all in mere seconds. This primes it or pre-trains the AI algorithm ahead of time. So when presented with a future scenario, it will know exactly what to say.
All right, so essentially, ChatGPT scans billions of patterns to learn how to converse with a human.
It does. That way, when the program is asked a question in real time, it can actually give an appropriate response right in context. And it found its way to answer all of those questions on its own. It didn't need a human because it was pre-trained in advance. It actually taught itself. That is machine learning. Annie does the same exact thing. But instead of words, we pre-trained it with numbers and data. It considers trillions of data points. The more information that you give Annie and its self-learning algorithm, the more accurate its prediction.
Okay, well, now we're starting to pull the curtain back on this a little bit because honestly, the charts that we've been going through in this presentation when we show Annie's forecast almost seemed as if it was arriving at these predictions by magic, you know? But in reality, what's going on behind the scenes is nothing more than advanced mathematics. You are pre-training Annie on massive data sets so Annie can learn on its own.
Exactly. But here's where things get even more interesting. Not only has this same method of pre-training been tried with ChatGPT and Annie to enable machines to learn on their own, but all sorts of other AIs out there. And what's really interesting is when scientists observe the process of how AI algorithms arrived at their end result, how the AI accomplished its ultimate task, the things it did along the way, they were pretty bizarre.
What do you mean by bizarre? How?
Okay, so let me just go ahead and give you an example. AI first started gaining recognition after it was tested in the world of chess. Chess was the perfect testing ground for AI because playing chess is ultimately about recognizing patterns and thinking through a series of moves and what-if scenarios to arrive at a single goal. Checkmating the king. It's the most important part. But when designers of AI-powered chess-playing programs started testing their systems years ago, they noticed something really weird about the strategies that their programs employed. They were extremely bizarre. They were strategies human players would never ever come up with, and in many cases would be outright ridiculed by chess grandmasters.
Interesting. And I think I know what you're talking about here. What would one of these bizarre strategies look like, though?
Well, for example, in chess, a player can sacrifice a key piece if he believes that sacrifice will lead to ultimate victory. Sacrificing pieces in the pursuit of victory, that has been a strategy in chess for centuries. However, to the surprise of human players, AI chess programs often make sacrifices that seem bizarre and nonsensical. AI chess programs would create wild and complex strategies humans would never ever think of. These AI-created chess strategies have been called alien and chess from another dimension. But they ended up crushing human players with those unconventional strategies, even grandmasters like the famous Garry Kasparov.
That's interesting. So what you're saying is that when a chess grandmaster was observing the moves the AI was making, to him they may have seemed completely outlandish, but in the end it was hard for him to criticize because the AI kept winning. The AI was arriving at its ultimate goal. It just got there in a way that no one would have ever thought of.
Yes, or even outright dismissed, because the AI was thinking on a completely different level here.
So what you're saying is when your team was analyzing the moves of Annie to find out the future price of Amazon, for example, I'm assuming you experienced the same kind of phenomenon. Was it making accurate predictions using data or correlations that seemed kind of weird, things you would have never thought to look at or compare?
By and large, the answer to that question is absolutely yes. We experience the same phenomenon as these chess players. Conventional wisdom tells us that what makes a stock price go up are strong fundamentals. Things like strong earnings, sales growth, cash flow, debt to equity, things like that. But when we just fed Annie thousands of data sets, told it to find the stock price 1 and 2 months from now, and essentially said, figure it out any way you would like. Like the chess-playing AI programs, Annie started making some moves that seemed a little bizarre. That is, the combination of factors it used to predict the stock price were, oftentimes, pretty unusual. More often than not, Annie put a lot more emphasis than we ever would have thought on macroeconomic and technical factors versus fundamentals. But also, that question is a little tough to answer because Annie analyzes every single stock differently every single day. Every stock is a different size, is in a different industry, has a different price history, has different products, services, management teams, revenue targets, you name it. Which means the weighting and combination of every factor is different for every single stock out there. Again, if we were to think of it like chess, no two chess games are alike. There are 32 pieces, each moving on an 8x8 grid. The combinations here of moves, they're essentially infinite. But the goal, the outcome, it's always the same. That is just checkmate the king. That's all that matters. Well, every single move is a new piece of information. So if an AI were playing a human in chess, the AI is actually adjusting based on every move and recalculating its strategy after every single turn. Annie does the same thing, only with stocks. Annie has the same goal with every single stock out there. That is, find the price 1 month into the future. But each new piece of data is like a different move on a chessboard that has to be taken into account in real time. And the analysis is slightly readjusted to make sure it's working towards its goal.
This is absolutely fascinating. I tell you, can we take another example here? because this is kind of fun here. Take a look at this. This is Annie's prediction of Johnson & Johnson, very well-known company, early this year. And as you can see, in late December, Annie made a prediction, a pretty sizable drop of around 10% or so. And this is very interesting because around the same time that Annie made that prediction, Johnson & Johnson actually made some big news in the healthcare field. It spent billions acquiring medical device makers like Abiomed and partnering with healthcare providers such as HCA Healthcare. And these moves, again, were praised in the media. I know Seeking Alpha called Johnson & Johnson healthcare for the win. Fidelity called it one of the best blue chips to buy for 2023. And I remember at the time, Jim Cramer over at CNBC was also singing its praises, saying it's going to return a lot of capital to shareholders. So what is going on here, Keith? Annie must be seeing something that the mainstream media did not, because it came to the opposite conclusion that they did. They said the stock price is headed down, and by a considerable amount, I might add, too.
Yeah, it did. It's actually making connections about the data that folks in the media would never be able to see. Conventional wisdom would tell us Johnson & Johnson is expanding its business interests. It's getting into a whole new multi-billion-dollar market, healthcare. It's made a great strategic acquisition there. This should grow profits. We should see a spike in its stock price.
Right.
This is what many of the smartest analysts concluded. And on the surface, it actually made total sense.
But the way stock prices move isn't always so logical, right?
Unfortunately, most investors know that harsh truth all too well. There is always more to the equation, more variables out there. As humans, we can become blinded by a single piece of good news, like a new acquisition, a business deal, or earnings forecast. Annie is a computer program. It just doesn't care. It doesn't have those biases.
Yeah.
It just looks at the data, and more specifically, at things that most folks would never ever consider. Sure, it took Johnson & Johnson's acquisition into account, but to Annie, it wasn't the end-all be-all. Its machine learning algorithm was also looking at factors the mainstream analysts probably never thought to consider, and it actually made connections and correlations that mainstream analysts never even think of.
Right, it's becoming clear to me. Annie doesn't have any hangups here. That's what we're saying. So like the early chess-playing AIs, Annie was making moves that financial analysts would consider weird, bizarre, even alien. Those are the words you used earlier.
That's right. To the average analyst or trader, these connections might seem totally crazy, but in reality, the opposite is true. They're actually quite logical. The human brain just doesn't have the speed or the firepower to make them. Annie was thinking on a completely different level than they were when it was trying to predict the price of Johnson & Johnson's stock.
Right. And the result?
Well, checkmate. The graph says it all right here. Over the next 2 months, Johnson & Johnson slid 10%, just as Annie said it would. In fact, the company even had some massive layoffs.
And so Annie beat out some of the top analysts in the financial media, essentially because it found connections, made some correlations that they could never hope to see. And it's those hidden connections that are so difficult for the human brain to make, as you mentioned, that predicted Johnson & Johnson's stock price. Through machine learning, Annie found out what they were and made a much more highly informed forecast, logical forecast, than the other human analysts.
I couldn't have put it better myself, Chris. And I'm so glad you used that term, hidden connections, because they're extremely important in the work that we do. This is what Annie is looking for while it's being pre-trained on billions and billions of data points. And it's what enables the algorithm to be so accurate. Remember, we pre-train the algorithm with billions of data points. And when you have billions of data points, most of those data points, they are just noise. They are meaningless. They don't have any impact on the future price of the stock. But some data points are the opposite. They're actually incredibly meaningful. They're a signal that can pinpoint where a stock is likely headed next. But which data points are they? And in what combinations do they need to be? And they're different for every single stock out there. What indicates that Apple is about to go up is going to be different from a small gold mining stock. And it changes as the market changes. Remember how earlier I said machine learning is all about giving a machine an angle and billions of data points, and it figures out the parameters on its own?
Yes, I do.
Okay, well, those parameters are formed by sorting through all of the data points and determining what's important and what is not important at the same exact time, and finding hidden connections or clues within the important data.
Right, and the unimportant data is thrown out because, as you said, it's just noise.
Yeah, it is. It doesn't really affect the future price of a stock, but more often than not, That's what the mainstream media focuses on, the noise. Things that seem like they should matter, but from a mathematical standpoint, they really don't matter at all. And that's what happened in the case of Johnson & Johnson. It's why Annie was right and the mainstream media got it wrong. As usual, the mainstream media got caught up in the noise.
Yeah, so Annie is pre-trained on millions of data points, is told, find the likely price of a particular stock 1 month into the future. And then it sets about uncovering those hidden connections that clue Annie into where the price is heading, sometimes down to 0.1%. So close.
Yep, that's it. That's the process in a nutshell. And Annie has done this thousands of times. And the results? They have been stunningly accurate. This is something no human could ever do. But if we could, if we were able to determine the same hidden clues Annie is, to us, the direction of each stock would be just as obvious, just as easy to predict.
Let's do this again. Can we take another example here? This is from last October when Annie was tasked with predicting the stock price of Domino's Pizza, right? Annie is predicting here that the stock is going up about 7 to 8% over the course of the next month or two. And you're saying at this particular point in time, Annie has identified the right hidden connections, so to speak, that clue it in to where the stock is likely going. So to Annie, where Domino's Pizza is heading is obvious, right? This is not guesswork.
Precisely. It seems pretty crazy that the movement of any one individual stock on a market down to the percentage point would seem obvious. But remember, Annie is thinking on a whole different level than you and I ever could. Factors and correlations we wouldn't even consider are like flashing green lights to Annie saying, this stock could go up 7%, or danger ahead, this stock is set to tank 15% the next month.
Yeah, so this sounds like something I couldn't even begin to fathom, how to make this work myself. But it's easy to follow a green light, definitely. And it's hard to argue with these results. Again, nearly spot on. Look at this. Over the next 2 months, Domino's stock went up about 7%.
You're right, Chris. The process Annie goes through to make these predictions isn't something that you could even begin to fathom, and that is not a knock on your intelligence. It's not something I could begin to understand either, or any other human being for that matter. Even if you're Warren Buffett, Gary Kasparov, Stephen Hawking, or any one of the brightest minds who's ever lived. And this is one of the biggest lessons that I learned working on our Annie project that I want to pass on to the viewers at home. And that is this: how superior the processing power of AI is to the human brain when it comes to certain tasks. Now, don't get me wrong, our brains are incredibly complex, but when it comes to making sense of a lot of data, whether that data is in a form of historical stock prices, moves on a chessboard, or baseball statistics, even a chess grandmaster like Gary Kasparov or a financial genius like Warren Buffett doesn't have 1,000th of the computational ability that an AI program does. It's not even a contest. So don't try to compete with AI. Instead, use it as a tool to predict the stock market and give yourself the chance to become wealthy. For example, you could use a prediction like this one on Autodesk and make as much as 15% in a month. Or this one of Carnival Cruise Lines and make as much as 12% in a month.
You know, considering not all predictions turn out like the ones that you just mentioned, it really is incredible to me how accurate these forecasts are. But I'm not quite seeing how they would make you wealthy. All right, so let's talk about this. That's only 15% or 12% in a month. And throughout our conversation here, we've cited a lot of examples of stocks that Annie's predicted, and it seems like a lot of them are around that same range, anywhere from 8 to 15% gains in a single month. So I'm going to be blunt here for just a moment, but those aren't exactly the most exciting financial transactions I've ever heard of. You know what I mean? How could somebody become wealthy by following Annie's predictions here? I mean, don't get me wrong, making 8% in a month, that's not bad, but it's not exactly going to change your life, financially speaking. You know what I'm trying to say.
Well, look, Chris, this is where you and I disagree. So let me just ask you this. If I told you shares of Amazon would be 8% higher 30 days from now, would you go ahead and buy shares?
Sure, yeah, certainly.
Well, why is that? I mean, with your line of reasoning, 8% isn't going to change your financial life. Why not take a chance on something a little bit more speculative, but with more upside potential?
Well, I guess it's because I'd take a sure thing, a certain 8% over anything with little or no certainty any day of the week, especially these days. Gee.
Exactly. And you know who else thinks that way? Wall Street. Now, believe me, I am no fan of Wall Street at all, but they always seem to win. So I've spent a lot of time studying what they do, and they rarely make a trade without knowing with an extremely high degree of certainty what will happen on the other side of that trade. And that is because in a world of high stakes finance, it's all about finding that edge, mitigating risk and maximizing gains at the same time. Wall Street are the masters of this. So while yes, 7% or 8% might not sound very attractive to the uninitiated, what about when that 8% is as mathematically close to certainty as possible? What if that 8% actually turns out to be 12%, 28%, or even 50% in 30 days? What if you could reliably cash in those gains over and over again, as often as you would like? This is the kind of edge the professional traders will pay a fortune to get.
So what you're saying is the real power of Annie lies in the amount of certainty and trust that you have going into each and every trade. No more guesswork.
That's exactly right. The value of certainty and trust, they are immeasurable. Wall Street knows this. It knows the power of AI. That's why it's essentially taken over their entire world. After learning what has made Wall Street so successful, it dawned on me. Everybody should be investing this exact way. And that's why we're making such a big deal about this event, Chris. As far as I'm aware, this is the first time in history that Wall Street grade artificial intelligence is being made available to Main Street. This is game-changing stuff. If you can reliably make 8% per month and compound it over a year, $10,000 turns into $25,000. $25,000 turns into $62,000. That is around a 150% gain in a year.
That is quite a return, and especially considering that you're just making modest gains along the way. That's impressive.
It is. And it shows you the power the compounding effect can have in just a short period of time. And that's on a modest 8% return. Well, what if we went ahead and dialed up just a notch to do a 12% monthly return? Now remember, 8% turned $10,000 into $25,000 in a year. Look what happens when we take the monthly gains up to 12%, a mere 4% greater than the original 8%. This is still a very achievable gain here.
Right.
But at 12%, the results, they are much, much better. That $10,000 turns into nearly $40,000. $25,000 would turn into $100,000. Or take this prediction of big lots.
All right. So it looks here like Annie says it's likely to go up 14% in a month, right in the range we've been talking about, which I'll admit before it didn't seem like anything special, but now it does look like it could be a big moneymaker.
Totally changes your perception of a 14% gain, doesn't it?
It does. I see your point, because knowing I stand a good chance to make 14%, way more exciting than a 1 in 10 shot that I'm going to make 100%. So I can see now what your point here of how having a high level of certainty can be a true game changer and help.
And let's see if that high level of certainty panned out.
All right.
Well, Annie was a little off, but in the right direction. Instead of making 14%, you would have actually made 21% on this trade. And if you were to compound 21% monthly, it's incredible. You would turn that $10,000 into nearly $100,000, and at $25,000 into nearly $250,000.
Right, and just like the 8% monthly gains and 12% monthly gains, 21% isn't exactly shooting for the moon here. I mean, that is, you said it a minute ago, that's a pretty reasonable gain and very attainable. But the results obviously are incredible, game-changing, as we mentioned. And as you just showed, since the gains aren't that huge, those incredible results come from the level of conviction, not the size of the gains. We're not talking 400% and 300% or even 100% in a month, just 12% here, 20% there, and depending on the size of your initial investment, within a matter of months, you could be adding tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands to your account, right?
Yeah, and this is one of the biggest things most investors overlook. And it's why they aren't successful, Chris. They don't take into account the probability that a particular investment will actually play out in real life the way they think it will, or the way they're told at the beginning. They hear about the next hot stock pick.
Right.
They're told, they can make 1,000% returns or more, and then how does it actually turn out for them? Well, from the start, it's really just a wild guess. They have no idea. That's why more often than not, it doesn't end up being a 1,000% gain, does it? More often than not, it ends up being a total loss, or it takes years and years to make just a modest gain. And that's because there are two huge factors to every single investment out there: the amount of money that you can make and the probability that outcome will occur. Everyone is so busy focusing on factor number one. How much money can I make from this investment? while not even giving a second thought to the second factor, which is so much more important. That is, how likely am I to actually make that money? That's why they're unsuccessful. Oftentimes, without even realizing it, they've gone for the all or nothing shot, and they actually passed up tons of other investments that could have still made them a solid return, but were far more likely to actually pan out. This is why so many individual investors fail to beat the market. Annie enables you to choose that first scenario, a solid return and a high probability it will happen, and choose it month after month after month, until you stack up such huge profits, you don't know what to do with them all. Look, Annie's not perfect 100% of the time, but its smart machine learning predictive AI program puts the odds so much in your favor that once you start using it, you'll never want to invest any other way again. Like I said, as far as I'm aware, nothing like it has ever been made available to Main Street before.
Right. So the message I'm getting is that probability is just as important as the gains.
It absolutely is.
Well, let's take another example of this, of Expedia. And in this example, looks like Annie's predicting you could make about 10% in a month on Expedia. And what you're saying now, Keith, is that the high likelihood you'll make that 10% is just as important as the 10% gain itself.
That's exactly right. Remember how we simply gave Annie a single command and had it learn on its own? There's a reason why we gave it the command of finding stock prices 30 and 60 days into the future, and not 2 and 3 years into the future. And that comes back to how confident we could be in those predictions. The closer to the present, the more accurate the prediction. The further into the future, the less accurate.
Right, and here the accuracy speaks for itself. Expedia is up almost exactly 10% in 4 weeks, 1 month.
It's the same concept with this example of Dish Network stock, up almost 8% in a month, just as Annie had predicted, or the stock of the apartment investment and management company AIV. Here, you had another great opportunity to make 8% in a month. This is why we focus on profiting from the market's short-term moves. Do you want to pick a stock based on how you think the world would be in 3 years from now? I mean, good luck, Chris. Just look at all the madness that's happening in the world today. No one could have ever predicted it several years ago. Who would have thought back in 2017 or 2018 that in a few years a virus would sweep across the world, forcing folks to quarantine in their homes, shutting down businesses, and cratering the stock market? Or that Russia would invade Ukraine? Or that we would actually see gas at $7 a gallon? No one could have seen these events coming. My point is this: even if you're using AI, trying to forecast years into the future is a very difficult task. But 1 month from now, we can get pretty accurate. Humans, they can't do that at all. In today's chaotic world, there's still a lot of money to be made. You just need to put the odds in your favor by focusing on what's more predictable, the market's short-term moves.
I'll say, man, and 1 month seems to be the sweet spot here, because as we've seen, you can use Annie to ring up one 1 month move after another and amass some pretty incredible gains here. It makes waiting 3 years to see your gains materialize look like a fool's errand here. So this is truly, I hate to keep using the word revolutionary, but it really is revolutionary. It's a system that you're revealing today, Keith. It also makes me wonder, why now? I mean, after all, we've already established AI has been around for some time. As you said, your company, TradeSmith, has been a leader in financial technology for more than a decade. Couldn't you have rolled this out years ago? I mean, that way you could have given your readers, your members, the chance to make some good money, even during all of this chaos that we've been experiencing over the last few years.
Chris, believe me, if we could have, we would have. And you are right. AI has been around for many, many years now. As we've mentioned, it has mastered board games like chess. It also made a splash by beating a grandmaster in the ultra-complex Chinese board game Go. It's been used by companies like Google and Amazon to predict customer behavior. Even companies like Hershey's, of all companies, to help reduce waste in their manufacturing process. But remember, we are using it for the financial markets, an arena with a nearly infinite number of data points to analyze. We couldn't have created Annie in the final form it's in today with early versions of AI. They just weren't sophisticated enough. We needed AI to reach a level where it could learn on its own. And that's where AI is right now. It has reached a very, very important inflection point.
An inflection point, which means it's going to grow exponentially from where it is right now. Well, we already have ChatGPT. Folks can't tell whether they're talking with a human or a machine. So to me, it feels like we've reached a pinnacle, not an inflection point. Do you agree?
Well, you're right. It does feel that way. But a big reason I believe AI is at an inflection point is because AI has recently broken a long-standing scientific law about the growth of technology, a law that's known as Moore's Law.
Right, Moore's Law. I've heard of that. It's got something to do with doubling the speed of computing, right?
It does. So back in the 1960s, a scientist named Gordon Moore, he observed the exponential growth rate of computing power and predicted every 2 years the number of transistors on microchips would double. In other words, computing would double every 2 years, like you said. This is now commonly referred to as Moore's Law. At the time, this predicted growth rate was seen as a breakneck pace, but it happened just as Moore predicted. In fact, over the past few decades, we've seen it happen with our own eyes. Just look at the advances in computing power. They have been remarkable. Today, the smartphone that you have in your pocket has far more computing power than all of NASA had when we sent a man to the moon in 1969. All of NASA.
Amazing.
So, since the dawn of computing, Moore's Law has held true. The growth rate of computing, fast as it's been, has held constant, doubling roughly every 2 years for the last 5 decades. But just recently, that has changed, and in a huge way. AI is now said to have broken Moore's Law. Now, top researchers are saying AI is doubling its computing rate, not every 2 years, but every 3.5 months.
Wow, 3.5 months. That is a huge change, truly revolutionary, especially when you consider the fact the growth rate is exponential.
Yes, and that is actually the key here. 3.5 months is roughly 7 times a shorter time frame than 2 years. But shortening the time computing takes to double from 24 months to 3.5 months doesn't mean it's advancing 7 times quicker. Since the growth rate is exponential, like you said, it's actually doubling on top of itself every 3.5 months, doubling on top of doubling on top of doubling. This means it's actually increasing by a rate of not 7 times faster, but of 2 to the 7th power faster, or 128 times faster.
And my brain just exploded. That is why you are the data scientist, Keith. Wow.
Well, Chris, math aside, what all this means is as smart as AI is, it's only going to get smarter and smarter over time. And it will be doing so at an extremely rapid pace. And as we've said, because of machine learning, it will be able to become smarter without a human learning on its own. Annie is a part of this new technological paradigm. It gets smarter over time, giving anyone with access to it a tremendous edge over everyone else.
Yeah. So with all of the accelerated growth of AI that you just outlined, where we are today at this particular point in time, this is really a critical point in technological history.
It really is. And unfortunately, most people don't fully understand that idea. And as a result, they're going to go ahead and get left behind.
Well, what do you mean by that, left behind?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, there's really only one place in America where folks truly understand the financial impact of everything that I've just outlined, and that is Wall Street. Look,
Okay.
AI is the entire game these days. Any Wall Street firm worth its salt is using machine learning and AI to analyze the market. I'm talking about Goldman Sachs, Bridgewater, JP Morgan, BlackRock. I mean, you name it, they're all using AI to gain an edge. But here's the rub, Chris. While these guys are happily using this technology to line their own pockets, they are not sharing it with the Main Street investor. You know the game. These guys will sell you mutual funds and other expensive fee-based products that rarely beat the market, rarely ever. But they keep the good stuff, the stuff that actually works, to themselves. That means if you're a regular guy who's not using AI and machine learning to invest, you're not getting the best possible research that's available today, especially if you're trying to play catch up on your retirement. Did you know that many Wall Street firms and hedge funds still made huge profits in 2022?
Yeah, I don't know that I actually knew that, but it doesn't surprise me.
In fact, one hedge fund, who uses AI primarily to make trades, made the most money any hedge fund has ever made. Meanwhile, the average investor, who doesn't have access to AI, lost around $40,000 in 2022. To this day, many investors are still sitting on major losses from last year. The simple fact of the matter is this: index funds and mutual funds are not going to save your retirement. AI can. Annie is living proof of that.
Yeah. So you're saying that everyday investors out there are only going to fall further and further behind as we move into a more technologically driven future with AI?
Yeah, look, Chris, I wish that wasn't the case, but sadly, that is the reality that we're faced with today. As we've seen today, never before in history has there been a tool with capabilities even close to AI and machine learning to find incredible gains quickly and, most importantly, with as little risk as possible. Using it to analyze stocks is like having 100,000 financial analysts at your fingertips. It is a godsend for any investor out there, but unfortunately, most folks don't have access to it. AI is expensive and it's complicated, and so it will remain the domain of Wall Street for many years to come. This puts the everyday investor and the vast majority of Americans at a massive disadvantage. It's like this. Imagine competing in a race where you're on a bicycle and everyone else is in a Formula One race car. It doesn't matter how much you've trained, how fast you can pedal. Even if you're a Tour de France champion, you are still going to lose.
Right, because the guys on Wall Street are using a far superior technology, and there's no incentive for them to share it with you.
That's exactly right, Chris. That is exactly the world that we live in today.
Right. So you and Annie are really the only path that regular people have to take on Wall Street and beat the market in this new AI-powered world that we've entered and find ourselves in.
Yes. As I mentioned before, my company has spent the past decade developing the most cutting-edge financial technologies on the market. This has connected me to quite a few folks in the highest circles of the financial world. And I don't know of anyone else who's using AI to help the regular guy. As far as I know, other than our firm, Wall Street's the only game in town.
So that doesn't leave regular folks with many options, especially in all the chaos that we've entered into.
Unfortunately, Chris, it does not.
But that's the big reason that you've stepped forward and that you're here today. That's why you're not keeping Annie's forecast all to yourself.
That's exactly right, Chris. You see, we have a retirement crisis in America today. I read recently that roughly 50% of seniors have little to no savings. And with everything that's going on in the economy, things are not getting any easier. Just last year, we saw the stock market drop nearly 20%. We have seen inflation hit historic highs: groceries, gas, healthcare, and education. The rising cost of everything is draining your savings. It's a terrible situation for people that are still working, but it's even worse for those who are not working. These folks are counting on their nest eggs to provide them with security and comfort. The value of their savings is being absolutely destroyed, and the future is only going to get more chaotic. So what are folks to do? Well, the answer isn't to invest in some long-shot cryptocurrency or tech startup that has low odds of panning out at some distant point in the future. The answer is to get smarter. That is, to invest in things that you know have a high probability of working out. And that is exactly what Annie does. It gives you an edge. It tips the scales in your direction, puts the odds on your side. And it won't take you years and years to see results. You could start making sizable gains in as little as a month.
Keith, I absolutely love the sound of this. So if I'm 65 years old, I'm about to retire, I'm looking at all of the chaos that we've been calling it, that's been happening in the markets, and I want to make it all back and then some so that I can live a comfortable, rich retirement, I shouldn't be thinking, what's the magic stock or crypto recommendation that's going to solve all my problems? Instead, I should be thinking about certainty, high probability.
Exactly right. There's no magic bullet out there, Chris. And even if there was, it would probably take 5 years or more to hand you the kinds of gains that you need to catch up on your retirement. Not to mention, that is putting all of your eggs into one basket.
Right, so I should be looking instead at one of Annie's forecasts, like we got another one here. This one is from Ford. And I should say to myself, Annie's predicting Ford could make me almost 12% this month. Why don't I put some money into Ford? So I do that. The month ends, we check the results, and in this case, Ford actually went up a little higher than Annie predicted. It went up 15%. I then sell, I take my 15%, and then as we discussed, I can then put that money into my next trade, and before I know it, in 6 or 8 months' time, I could be sitting on some pretty nice and pretty big gains.
That's exactly right. Doesn't that sound a lot better than putting your money in a stock and waiting 3 years, hoping and praying?
Yeah, boy, does it ever.
And 15% might even be on the lower end. We've seen many examples of stocks Annie's predicting will go up 25% or more in a month. 50% is actually well within reach. This is a system that you could put to work to get you on a path to living the retirement of your dreams in just a few months. If you took $10,000 and made 50% gains per month, you would walk away with nearly a whopping $1.3 million in a year. Even if you do a fraction as well, you're still walking away with several $100,000.
And that would be quite a tidy little profit, especially considering that all investing carries a little bit of risk, right? And past performance doesn't always equal future success. But going back to what we were discussing before, I know there's a lot of people who are watching right now at home, and they're finding themselves in the situation that you described earlier. They are at or near retirement age. They may have suffered some investment losses over the last year or two. They feel behind because of inflation. They certainly like this idea of certainty. The advanced mathematics, the AI, machine learning can tip the odds in their favor and not only help them make some big gains, but give them peace of mind that an investment prediction has a high probability of going where it's forecasted to go at the outset. So we've covered the theoretical. Love it. Let's talk about the practical now. How do people out there at home put everything that we've talked about into practice? How did we take Annie's predictions and incorporate those into our investing and make the kind of money that we've been talking about? What are the practical steps here?
That is just such a great question, Chris. And it all starts with a brand new research service that my company, TradeSmith, is launching for the very first time. Remember, for the past decade, TradeSmith has been a leader in creating the most cutting-edge financial innovations for the everyday person. We have created predictive technologies for the stock market, the options market, the crypto market. Our systems analyze commodities, ETFs, real estate trusts. I mean, you name it, they study it. And they've helped thousands of everyday folks, from school teachers like my parents to accountants to doctors, live the retirement of their dreams.
They certainly have. In fact, we did this before, but I've had the privilege of reading some of those letters that they wrote. And here are what a few more of them said. Robert M. said, I have close to 30 positions, over 100%, and many more that are still open and climbing. With my leader being a 2,400% winner, I'm up over $200,000. Leslie S. said one of your products was the best tool that she's ever purchased, Keith, and she feels that she no longer is guessing, but relying on factual data at her fingertips. Wes W. said your tools have helped him make $100,000. And we've got Frank K., who said that thanks to your company's research, he and his wife have finally hit millionaire status. That has got to feel good, not just for them, but for you too.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, it feels great. We just love receiving letters like those, especially considering the terrible market that we've been in the last 18 months. Those stories are why we do what we do. But I imagine we might be receiving some even better than those just a short time from now. Because as good as all of the innovations that we've launched in the past have been, today, I am happy to announce TradeSmith is launching a research service that's on an entirely new level, the next generation of predictive technology. It is a research service that we call Predictive Alpha, and it is the only AI and machine learning-based research service that we know of available to the everyday person. Predictive Alpha will contain all of Annie's stock forecasts, updated daily for nearly 3,000 stocks, funds, and ETFs. And members will be able to look up one stock per week to see what Annie's saying the future price of that stock will be in 1 month. But that is just the start. Remember, Annie is getting smarter all of the time. So it's only a matter of time before we're confident in Annie's predictions in even more stocks beyond the nearly 3,000 that are currently available. And we add even more stock predictions to Predictive Alpha. Just type in the ticker symbol and you will be able to see what Annie's saying the future price will likely be. Not only that, we have a team of data scientists and market analysts who will be devoted to this research service full-time, analyzing Annie's predictions, finding the most potentially lucrative stocks, and issuing easy-to-follow trade recommendations.
So this interview just keeps getting better and better as it goes along. So this sounds like there are really two ways to go about using your service here. You can either do your own research and search for stock opportunities yourself, or you could take the recommendations from your team of experts, Keith.
That's right, Chris. You could do either one or take a combination of both.
Right, so this is great. Now, if I was watching this at home, this clearly sounds like great news to have access to technology of this caliber. But I got a couple of questions. First of which is, my big concern, do I have to be good with numbers on this? Do I have to be a computer expert to be able to use Predictive Alpha, a mathematician?
Not at all, Chris. I mean, it's a great question. Look, as we said, there are two ways to use this service. The first is to do your own research. We created a members-only website where we will be hosting Predictive Alpha. When you sign up to become a member, you'll receive access to this site. When you get to the site, all you have to do is type the ticker symbol of any stock that we cover, press the search button, and Annie's prediction will be produced for you right there on the screen in a matter of seconds. A new prediction is generated every single day for nearly 3,000 stocks and ETFs. And, as I said, we plan on adding even more in the future.
All right. Oh, well, that does sound pretty easy.
It is, Chris. I mean, we have made it drop dead simple to use. I like to say, if you can use a search engine like Google, you can use Predictive Alpha. That's the level of computer savvy that you need to have to use this service. Simply type the ticker symbol or name of the stock into the search box, and Annie will generate a fully detailed prediction forecast for the next 30 days. Do this once per week for any one of the stocks that we cover. This can add a lot of conviction to your investing, both in terms of the availability to make big gains and avoid big losses. But believe it or not, we have made it even easier than that. As I mentioned, we also have a team of devoted analysts who will interpret Annie's findings and send you their favorite recommendations via email trade alerts whenever a great new opportunity arises. One every other week or two per month. The two gentlemen who head up this team are some of the top market experts in the country. One is a Harvard-educated analyst who holds two of the most difficult financial certifications that you can attain. He is both a CFA, that's a Chartered Financial Analyst, and he's also a CMT, a Chartered Market Technician. Because of his market experience and insights, he's been featured in Forbes and on NASDAQ.com. He's also a natural-born teacher and coach who has created investment courses for some of the largest banks and brokerage houses in the country. The other gentleman is cut from the same exact cloth. He's an MBA who lives and breathes investing. He's also developed investment courses and has been published numerous times, including a book that he co-authored about Forex trading. And every week, these gentlemen are going to get on camera and provide a weekly video in which they discuss the state of the markets and provide updates about their recommendations. You'll also receive a transcript of these videos if you would prefer to read these updates instead.
All right, so this is reassuring. Sounds like if I were to sign up, I'd be in very good hands here.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, folks, you would be in great hands with us. We know that investing using an AI machine learning algorithm is new for most people out there. So we wanted Predictive Alpha to also include a personal touch. We wanted to add in that extra level of service. So there will also be folks I trust probably even more than myself, helping you get the most out of your membership every single step of the way. When you become a member of Predictive Alpha, you're also getting research and analysis from an entire group of some of the brightest financial analysts in the country.
So it seems as though using this tool is going to be fairly easy, as simple as looking at a chart, and we can do that. But for folks who don't want to look up stocks on their own, obviously these two gentlemen you mentioned earlier are going to issue recommendations.
They are. I mean, look, every day they're analyzing Annie's findings to determine the most lucrative trades on the market, ones with the highest probability of going up. And once every other week, they're going to go ahead and issue a trade with a holding time of about a month.
Now that's interesting because throughout our presentation today, we've been talking about, we've shown Annie's predictions, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months. So all the trade recommendations in Predictive Alpha, if I'm hearing you right, they're going to have the holding time of just 1 month?
They are. 1 month, which translates to about 21 trading days. And You're right. We showed many examples of Annie's predictions that went out as far as 2 months, and they were pretty accurate. But like I said before, the shorter the time horizon from the prediction point, the more accurate the forecast is likely to be. So we are more confident in the 1 month forecast, and the shorter holding time allows you to compound your gains much more quickly.
Right, and if I were to sign up, your team is essentially going to be doing all the heavy lifting for me, or Annie is.
Yes, they would be. Let me give you an example of a trade. Here's one of Annie's predictions for advanced micro devices. Here, in early October, Annie is predicting AMD will go up around 13% over the course of the next month. So, if our team determined this was one of the best stocks to buy, they would issue a buy alert in October. Then you would simply hold the stock for about a month and then sell when they recommend to go ahead and sell. The final step is simply to collect your potential profits. In this case, AMD went up a little less than Annie forecasted, around 10%. So if you had invested $5,000, you would walk away with an extra $500 in only a month. So that is it. It is just that straightforward, just 3 steps. Get in, get out, make gains. So step 1, get in when our team recommends and hold for about a month. Step 2, roughly 1 month later, sell when our team recommends to sell. Step 3, this is my favorite part, make the gains.
Yeah, my favorite part too. And it does sound very easy to follow.
You know, I believe it is. And of course, we encourage you to carefully consider each recommendation. But you can do so with the calm that comes from knowing my team has already reviewed each of Annie's results. In addition to 2 recommendations per month, folks will also receive 3 free special reports and a free ebook when they sign up. Today, we have discussed a lot of topics on how to invest using our machine learning-based system. Everything from how Annie predicts stock prices to compounding your gains to how important probability is when choosing your investments. My team has put all that information and a lot more in a brand new, easy to read report called the Predictive AI Playbook. This playbook is the ultimate starter guide to begin investing using Annie's recommendations. It will tell you step by step how to use our predictive software, how to interpret our recommendations, and how to place your trades. It doesn't matter if you've never bought a stock before in your life. You can use our service. And this report will guide you through every step of the process. I recommend you read through it as soon as you sign up. It should only take you about 10 minutes or so to go through it. And after that, you'll be putting yourself in a great position to make big gains with high probabilities.
Keith, your team seems to me has really put together a complete toolkit here on how to profit using predictive alpha. This is great.
We have, Chris. And look, we really want to give folks the best information possible to help change their financial lives, which is why we're also including an ebook that my team and I wrote recently called The Foundations of Wealth with this special offer. This ebook walks you through the investing world step by step, everything from building a portfolio to risk management to asset allocation. It is all in there, and it's all so important. And what sets this book apart and why we want to put it in the hands of everyday folks is it takes what some people think of as intimidating financial concepts and makes them very easy to understand. There is no jargon, no complicated charts and graphs, just simple plain language that anyone can follow.
Well, let me be the first to say thank you for that. I can certainly identify with not having to deal with techno jargon. I have been somewhat immersed in the investing world for a while now, but at first I have to admit there were things that I didn't fully understand. But whenever I found a simple explanation to a term or concept, I'd have one of those aha moments, and the pieces of the puzzle would start to gel in my mind and fit together a little bit more. And I realized that investing, personal finance, those things really aren't all that complicated as long as you have things explained in the right way, and really anyone can get it at that point. And I'm sure the point here is that's what your book does. So I'm glad you're including it for myself and everyone else out there. Something that I wish I'd had when I was starting out.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that, Chris. Sometimes the right information or explanation can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Which is why we want to put the best research available into the hands of our members. And part of that is a second free special report that folks will get when they sign up. So look, we have talked a lot about machine learning today and how it's changing society, how it made a huge splash when it was introduced into the world of chess, how it's breaking Moore's law, and how it recently reached an inflection point with ChatGPT. Our company, TradeSmith, is all about providing our members the world's most cutting-edge financial research, and that can be in the form of actual recommendations or just in information in general, which is why we recently put together another brand new special report all about what's going on today in the world of AI and machine learning. This report will dive more into the history of AI with interesting stories and anecdotes of early breakthroughs in this cutting-edge field, taking you all the way up to the present day, bringing you up to speed on the latest news, technology, and behind-the-scenes projects that are in the works today, especially in the field of finance. This report is called The AI Investing Revolution and is one of the most interesting and informative write-ups that we have ever put together on the subject. And it's not available to the public anywhere at any price. But today, it's yours free if you become a new member of Predictive Alpha.
Wow. So Keith, not only are you rolling out a brand new service here, the only AI and machine learning based research service we know of, but for new members out there, you are giving away a lot of valuable information and resources. Like I said a minute ago, this is a complete toolkit.
Yeah, we are, Chris. And look, there's one more thing, one more element to this toolkit that I want to add in. This is a special bonus that's only available for folks who sign up with this offer. Throughout this presentation, we have talked about investing with AI. After all, that's what Annie's all about, right? That's what drives its algorithm. But there's another side to profiting from the AI revolution, and that is investing in AI. That is, backing the most innovative AI companies on the market for the chance to see huge gains. As we showed you, we're at an inflection point in AI right now. We are still in the early stage of this massive technological megatrend, the biggest since the rise of the internet. And folks who are forward-thinking enough to invest in companies that build businesses that leverage the power of that world-changing innovation made incredible wealth. Little-known startups like Google, Amazon, and Facebook became worldwide sensations in a few short years, handing early investors incredibly massive gains. As these companies were pushed to incredible heights thanks to the adoption of the internet. Well, we predict the same thing's going to happen, but only with AI this time. Only this trend will be even more profitable than we've seen before. That's why my team of analysts have scoured the AI business landscape to find 3 of the most cutting edge, most potentially profitable AI-driven companies on the market. We believe the stock of each has the potential to soar in the near future. So, we put the names, ticker symbols, and even buy up to prices, as well as a short write-up about each company in a brand new special report called the AI Stock Report, 3 cutting-edge companies poised for massive gains.
This is really incredible what you've put together here, Keith. I'm so glad that we've had you. So much value here. Why don't we take a moment, and I want to summarize for everyone watching at home what they're going to get. When you sign up to become a member of Predictive Alpha, you're going to receive the following: use of the Annie predictive algorithm for 1 stock search per week. Every week, you'll be able to enter 1 stock of your choice into TradeSmith's predictive system to see what Annie is forecasting the future price of that stock will be 1 month into the future. And remember, right now you've got nearly 3,000 stocks, ETFs, and funds to choose from. You're going to get 2 new stock recommendations every month, access to research from a team of the top market analysts and data scientists in the country. You'll get a weekly video market analysis and update on the recommendations from Predictive Alpha. Special report number 1, the Predictive AI Playbook. Special report number 2, the AI Investing Revolution. Special report number 3, the AI Stock Report, 3 cutting-edge companies poised for massive gains, and the Foundations of Wealth ebook. Keith, I hope I didn't leave anything out. There's a tremendous amount of research available here, very valuable stuff. And like you said earlier, AI has been a godsend for investors out there. It's a tool unlike anything we've seen before, and you are the only one out there that I know of who is bringing AI and machine learning to the regular guy out there. We already went over how this type of technology is the domain of Wall Street, and it will be for years to come. I'm sure that they would charge a fortune to access it. But since your company, TradeSmith, is designing this financial technology specifically for the little guy out there, I'm guessing Predictive Alpha is much more affordable.
Absolutely, it is, Chris. Now remember, my company has spent over $18 million and over 50,000 man-hours developing this technology.
Right.
We know it's going to be very valuable. But as you said, we created this new AI technology to serve the little guy, not Wall Street. So we're not here to gouge anyone. We won't at all, which is why we have set the retail price of Predictive Alpha at $199. I think that retail price is a very fair price.
Ooh, yeah, considering everything that you receive when you sign up, I'd say that's more than fair. That's great.
It is. But folks, remember, this is a brand new research service, which means anyone who signs up today will be among the first members to ever join it. So, folks who sign up for this special offer will receive a whopping 75% discount off the retail price and can become members to Predictive Alpha for only $49.
A 75% discount. Well, that is very generous, a great offer. Now, how can people sign up and receive everything that we've talked about today?
Great question. Folks, you should see a button on your screen. Go ahead and simply click that button, and it will take you to a secure membership page where you can sign up to become a new member to Predictive Alpha and receive access to all of Annie's predictions, as well as all of the recommendations and special reports that we discussed during this presentation.
Right. Keith, that I think just about does it. But before we wrap up here, we do owe everyone at home some stock predictions from Annie's, right?
That's right, Chris. We'll go ahead and put them on the screen right now. As you can see, these are some of the most talked about companies in the world right now. And here's where Annie is predicting their stock prices will be 1 month in the future. If you want, you can grab a pen and paper and copy these predictions down.
Keith, this is terrific information that you're sharing with all of us right now. I want to thank you for doing that. But keep in mind, this is just a fraction of all the knowledge that you have shared with us today. And all that great information and value that you've packed into Predictive Alpha is incredible on another level, really. Keith, AI has been in the news a lot lately. I know I've been very interested in the topic. I had a lot of questions, and I really got a lot out of today's interview, and I know everyone watching did as well. So just to wrap up here, I want to sincerely thank you for joining us today. It's been terrific.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Chris. I really appreciate all the time that you spent with us.
Absolutely. And there you have it, folks. You just witnessed the official unveiling of the Predictive AI Software Learning Engine, or Annie, one of the only algorithms on the market that's capable of analyzing billions of data points, and from that data, teaching itself which factors will predict the stock price 1 month from now for thousands of different stocks. And as we've seen today, Annie's predictions have been pretty darn accurate, some of them right on, spot on. Anyone who has access to these predictions could use them to avoid big losses and also make some big monthly gains with a level of certainty that has rarely, if ever, been achieved before, bringing you more wealth in the next few months than you've ever dreamed possible. And AI is already revolutionizing our world. Now it can revolutionize your financial future. All you've got to do is click the button on the screen and get started.